Good morning and welcome to the Effective Business Hub podcast, the show where we dive deep into the minds of today's most innovative startups, dynamic enterprises, and the ideas reshaping how business gets done. I'm your host, Tom Dimmer, and today we're exploring the frontier where technology meets real-world impact with a company that's redefining how remote systems operate, monitor, and respond to their environments. Our guest today is Jay Kriner, CEO of the Gale Project and company developing advanced autonomous infrastructure for everything from public safety and industrial to space-based applications. Jay spent years turning this from a bold concept into an intelligent remote monitoring system and tangible, scalable platform. He sits at the intersection of AI, hardware, and real-world engineering, a combination that perfectly embodies what we love exploring here at the Business Hub podcast. Jay, welcome to the show. It's great to have you here.
Tom. Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
So, Jay, the Gale Project. You've come from a very varied background. Why don't you give me a little background, the origin story of how did Jay Kriner get with the Gale Project and how did that all evolve?
Yeah, so Gale kind of was conceived in 2016 when I was working with drones. This was kind of like when drones first came to market. And I was using it for just surveying and mapping. And at the same time, I live in the Texas Hill Country and it's flood prone. We have rivers and lakes, and when things happen, it usually happens bad. And I started looking a little bit more of like the drone as first responder, but this was well before this was established in the industry. But I knew that drones could be used for a good purpose. But I started looking at, flood scenarios. You always have to drive to the flood. You always have to arrive there, But what if we had drones that were already through the infrastructure, that were in areas that are high risk? And then I was thinking more. I was like, okay, this is before drone in a box too, which is usually on the ground. I was like, well, utility poles. Look at any natural disaster and you'll always see a utility pole and the top of it is never flooded. So I was like, perfect. There we have our infrastructure, our power, our deployment station, high angle view. I was like, if there's going to be a drone anywhere, that's where it needs to live. So that's what kind of conceived the entire idea of the Gale system. And, we started with just drone as first responder. But I was like, what if the drone's not being deployed? What are we doing in the background? And that's where we started coming up with 20 different ideas, from monitoring, early alert, weather analysis, and it just kept going on. And I'm sure there'll be 50 more ideas.
So when you started developing your concept and then bringing it to reality, what did that early stage development / public access look like? So when you first started to contact your first public agencies or whatever to develop this system, did you create partners? How did that first early development and roll out to a functional prototype look to you?
Yeah, so from an engineering standpoint, we got scratch paper, right? So we'll draw and draft everything and then change it 20 more times and then decide to go to Home Depot and Amazon. And then we're like, okay, here's a model, a non-pretty version. So my biggest thing is I really wanted to reach out to the end user, and that's municipalities, that's fire and rescue, that's PD, that's anybody that's trying to do public safety. So I reached out to my local department here in New Braunfels and I said, hey guys, I'm working on this. I'm trying to solve this problem. I know that you guys deal with some drones now. I would really like to kind of show you what I'm doing, what I'm working on. And at the end of the day, I told them, tear it apart. Tell me what you don't like. Tell me what you would change and tell me what you need. And this was all very early stage. And by doing so, I was able to construct not only their needs, their use cases, what their asks were, to give me an idea of how to better design in product that fit directly into what they're asking for. So we joke about this in the engineering world. You come up with a scrappy prototype, and it, no joke, it was made out of Home Depot, like a concrete form tube, and I got a doggy window from Amazon, the dome that went on top, and we made the Gale system, like a 1.5 foot version of it, and I did that right before I went into that meeting. And no joke, it still smelled like spray paint. And I got because I labeled it too. I'm a super nerd on that stuff. I wanted to show sections of it, so I got pinstripe tape from AutoZone, and I made all the rings around it. And I really tried to create a visual, being super scrappy, because most people like visuals, and especially if you can look at it and touch it, and everybody starts to say, well, what if it did this? That really helped me a ton. And then I gave that entire system to our engineering firm, and I was like, here's what the concept is, make it real. And then we start really diving into the engineering aspect.
So that's the fun part. So how about all the stuff that you have to do in the background? So every person, every CEO, every manager that I ever talked to, it's like, okay, that's the really fun part. That's what I love doing every day. So what's the things that you go, okay, here's the things I got to do, but I kind of hate to do at Gale? What are the mundane stuff that really makes it all work?
I hate spending money. But at the end of the day, like any startup, no matter what level, if you're bootstrapping or if you got some type of investment, you got a penny pinch, right? So that was the big thing that I had to like understand. I can't engineer all of this in-house. I need to sub that out. I need to get different materials and 3D printing. But the big part of it for me was I started to create partnerships. And I knew our system was going to have a camera system in it. If not just one, multiple. And I tried to really research who are the best providers for that? What features do they offer? What is a turnkey solution that I know I'm going to end up using in my manufacturing down the line? But then I can open up the door with right now and say, look, guys, I'm new. I'm just beginning. This is what we're working on. We're going to try to solve real world problems. And I think I want to use your systems in it. Once you kind of mention that to some, even the big players, like we partnered with Hanwha Vision. It's a South Korean company, but also in the US, $6 billion company, huge company. And we told them the story. And I was like, look, this is what we're trying to solve. Your camera with AI behind it could really monitor flood zones or traffic management, or we could do license plate reading. There's a whole slew of things behind it. And they were like 100% on board. And they were like, all right, here's a system to test and play with. And then we were like, oh, this is fun, gadgets and toys. And, now we could really start to test our systems out at an early stage. But by doing that and partnering with folks that are in the industry, not only are you saving money right up front, but you're also creating a long-term relationship to where as you grow, they're getting a little, of the PR aspect of it as well. And at the end of the day, when we go to market and we use their systems, we're increasing their revenues as well. So it was a great way to do it. And finding those right partners was a massive part of how we went from it. Everybody's like, oh, you're on fire. You're moving so fast. I was like, this is like a laser right now. Like it's going so quick, so fast. But it was because of those partnerships. I didn't have to invent the camera. I didn't have to invent the AI behind it. Like it was already implemented for a turnkey solution. And with that partnership, just made it like, okay, let's skip to the next step. We just did like a $100 million innovation for free. Let's move forward.
That is a jumper when you can actually lay on top of the work that they've already done and be able to integrate that in. That's a tremendous opportunity.
I'll tell you, there's a lot of things folks try to say is like, I need to invent this or, implement that. I was like, look, the folks that invented cell service didn't invent the camera, or the screen. Like once you start finding the right things to make it into a hardware, the technology is there. But our goal at the end of this is, we're going to initially launch with some tech that is from third parties. But at the end of the day, we know down the road, we're going to find a need, and then we're going to have to draft and engineer in-house a better solution tailored to that end client. And that's everything from the hardware to the software.
So what does your growth path look like right now? Is it a production, integration, client, just client adoption, or what does your growth path look like now?
So when we really wanted to ask a lot of folks and interview the end users and say, here's what we're working on, give us your feedback. And then the last part of the discussion, and it was kind of funny, I never had to ask any of these folks, would you mind if we put one here? They were like, would you like to test it here? And I'm like, yes, I would. So it would naturally work out like that to where we're going to do a pilot system. And the pilot system's not only for our internal validation, it's an end user validation that allows us to say, one, it does operate, it turns on and functions as designed. But two, did we save a life? Did we cut down response time? What uses are you getting out of it? Because once they validate that in the industry, it is like wildfire. And that is by design. We want them to be successful because we want them to tell everybody else about it. So it got us a foot in the door with our first customers. But then at the end of the day, they're telling everybody in the industry, not only is our city cutting edge, look at this new technology we have and we're using, everybody else is going to be like, I want it. That's Absolutely. The plan, right? Yeah.
You always rather have a pull than a push.
Yeah. So we still cross fingers, but at the end of the day, we are the first to market on it. It's an easy, Easy one, because it's not like we're a direct competitor of another company. There are some similar things out there. Drone in a box is something similar. But jokingly, it is a box on the ground. It does nothing besides open and close and flies the drone autonomously. But we thought about it. We're cutting out the entire infrastructure, a concrete pad or on top of a roof, and then the power source that has to go to it. And then what if it floods, it rains, and vandals, wildlife? There was so many, I wouldn't call it negative aspects, but we were like, look, if we're on top of a utility pole, we have the power, we have the infrastructure, we have the field of view, we have the security. And that was like the first time. It always surprised me, like, why didn't think of this before? And how are we the first ones to do it? But here we are, and we're going to chase that.
That it's always the obvious stuff, and everybody goes, "Why didn't I think of that?"
I think I can say I'm an expert at that now, is because the other things that I've created in my past absolutely had no physical real world use, but they went viral. I joke about it. I had the patent and created what is called the Bev buckle. It's a belt buckle that flips out and holds your drink. Okay. No one ever needed that. Like, it wasn't like an ask, but it was a novelty that it went viral and got us on Shark Tank even. It was an amazing product, but completely different than what we're doing with Gale, like tech and engineering. And it was very much more expensive too.
So from your vantage point, how has that remote monitoring and autonomous space changed over the last 5 years? I mean, what are you guys seeing for the growth opportunities in that entire space? It's huge, but what is your guys' take on it?
Yeah, so when we say which one is going to be the industry we chase first to, we can say public safety. That's an easy one. But then as we were developing this and trying to figure out our go-to-market strategy, we knew public safety was first. But then there was rail car monitoring, because there is like very little monitoring along our whole entire rail system throughout the US or anywhere. Then there was maritime. Then there was environmental monitoring, wildlife, oceanics. That was a whole nother one that we came up with, like putting it on top of a buoy. So it just started to morph into all these other ideas. And we're trying to figure out, like, where will it land first, right? That's the go-to market. Mm-hmm. But then as we start to develop, we saw that robotics is obviously a hot topic. Autonomy is another big one. And how we're fitting into those spaces, we're kind of tying in what's the big boom is the smart intelligence behind things that can provide information faster, more accurately than a human eye or response can do. And then how we can benefit that in each one of those sectors. At the end of the day, and I kind of mentioned that before, is we didn't have to invent all of the AI. It exists. We're just using now the best hardware possible to leverage that AI. So AI won't exist unless there's hardware. And I think a lot of folks are kind of skipping that step. Like, you can create all the nice, cool things on software, but at the end of the day, you got to have something where it goes.
When people are talking to you, and you, of course, as every company does, we always make it look easy, right? That's the impression you want to make. It's like, we're so smart, we're really good at what we do. This is the easiest thing that we could possibly come up with, and we're going to make it so easy for you to deploy that it's like candy. You got to have it. But if you were going to say to somebody, what's the greatest myth that everybody gets wrong about how difficult it is to build a system like Gale, what would that be?
Simplicity. In an engineering mindset, you can say, I've got all of this functionality, I've got robotics, I've got all these internal guts. How do I reduce that to be the most simple product possible, not just for manufacturing cost, assembly, and maintenance, but aesthetics too? So that is a big step I think a lot of folks miss, is I created all of this great stuff. I need to make it look appealing. I need to make it function as simple as possible, and kind of factor in some redundancies in the background of what if, like in our system, what if it rains? Where does the water run? What if a bird lands on it and wants to make a nest? We have to think about those background things while we're developing an end product. And I think that's a big part a lot of folks skip, is they get tunnel vision focused on the product and the solution and forgot about the packaging and what that packaging effect is. Like I said, it's got to withstand the UV light, the rain, the gale force winds, and so forth. And it could be torn apart in the desert, and it would be different in, let's say, Orlando.
You've been building this system up. So let's look at your actual team that you're working with. So how does your team balance your hands-on engineering and product innovation with the admin, compliance, and coordination with all these advanced technical projects?
Yeah, so by strategy, right? You always want to get the best team you can have, and we leveraged not only just my network. We found a great individual. William Fraser is on our team for advisory, and he's a SIBR SBIR winner as well, or awardee. He found me on LinkedIn. He was like, "Hey, I saw what you're working on. I love it. I think I can really contribute because I was doing autonomous vehicles and smart cities." And I was like, perfect, let's talk. And that kind of helped with that aspect. But when you start growing a team, like we knew that we couldn't have 20 engineers on our payroll right now. So as you start up, we know we have to outsource the engineering aspect of it. So we call it a partner because we are in bed with each other at this point.
Yeah.
Those are my very close friends now, and we love to talk engineering, but also share a beer. So when you start to work in that angle, you can have your internal team, and ours is very strategic from operations. We've got DoD specialists that come from naval background, maritime, problem solving, really. So we got that aspect. But one of the big ones is we're dealing with drones. Our system doesn't always have to have the drone on it because we're modular. Some cities might say, I only want the base station that has the camera and some sensors. Later on, I'll add the drone because of regulations. FAA regulates autonomous operations and drones. And now it's getting a lot easier and better, but you have to have someone on your team, if not many, that understand that regulatory aspect and that can help you navigate not just the verbiage for what they call waivers for the FAA, but also understand where is the industry going? What are we solving? And then what can we start to write in our documents that say, we did address the safety, the pre-flight check, the ceiling height of how the drone will fly. Is it going to go up to 400 feet, when it doesn't need to? I think 100 feet is plenty. So, we're really creating a great micro ecosystem in itself. So we have our internal team, and then we subcontract out to the best that we can find that fits out, what we are working on and has the same energy. And as we scale, obviously, we're going to start bringing in all the internal team as well.
So when you look at where you want Gale to be 3 to 5 years down the road, what does that look like to you? Is that going to be full production? Is it going to be full team, or where are you looking at 3 to 5 years down the road?
Yeah, we're going to be in space, 100%. Yeah, no, jokingly, like that, we did file for the IP on the space application of the first rover dock as well. Now that is a pipeline. We're focusing on the Gale system here. We already have written out a very OCD version of where the budgets go, where we spend, where our burn rates, our hiring. The map, the way it came out was after our seed round, which we're going to open up this next month with our physical prototype, which is a huge win for us. We were already looking at what month do we go positive in cash flow? When are we really scaling? And then where are we putting the money to scale faster at that point? Year 2, we are already hot in the market is what we're mapping out. But at the same time, it's like, okay, well then what is going to be next? Is it the 2.0 version? And we always joke about that, right? Because it's like an iPhone. There's a new one every year. They got to keep you buying, right? Well, the same thing, new technology is going to come out and we're going to have to implement that into our system. What that tech is yet, we don't know because obviously it's still being developed. So in like 2 to 5 years, we're still going to try to make our system as modular and open source as possible. We went the open source route because if other folks are coming out with great innovation that we didn't have to create for them, they're solving problems as well. Let's give them a section, we call it the auxiliary section of our dome tops, and be like, look, fit in whatever you come up with into this. And all we have to do is, we call it just click right on. And then now your system is tied into ours. So I think that was a great approach in saying, we're not going to work with anybody else. No, we want everybody else. We want everybody to come up with something that helps our system be a better system. So that was what we definitely see in the 2 to 5 year pipeline. But we have got some R&D stuff working in the background of other fun projects, and they're on the back burner because we have to focus on this one first. But after 5 o'clock, am I tinkering with something else? Always. Like, you can't stop.
You've got to figure out how to pay the bills first, and then the fun stuff hits again. When you look at the emerging technologies, the open source, is there any one that really jumps out at you and says, hey, we're looking at this in probably 18 to 24 months. This is going to be really cool, obviously without giving away your secret sauce. Is there some emerging technologies in general that you're like, this is going to be something that everybody's going to be building in? This is something we need to adapt?
Yeah, there are some folks we're talking to now that they already have a product out that I would love to see implemented into ours. Drone Shield, they have a drone radar system that I'm really fond of right now. The nice thing about it, and everybody asks, why do we need a drone radar system? I was like, well, you don't understand that it's regulated. You can't just fly drones willy-nilly everywhere because there is a public safety hazard, more so around airports. That's a big deal. So I definitely can see that technology is being tied into us perfectly. But on the other aspect of it is weather. I could definitely see how we can make these weather stations, because if we're tied in across a large footprint, we're able to monitor stuff that obviously they have weather monitoring everywhere in the world. But if we're able to use vision, we can see cloud formations live on the ground now versus being relayed through a radar system. Now, there's a lot more in depth that we can do. And it even goes as far as vegetation growth and monitoring. Some people say, well, why do we need to see how much the grass grows? Well, it's not just that. Is there invasive species? Are there things that we need to be aware of? And are things starting to die? And why? And that goes to the environmental aspect of it.
So does that drone radar monitoring also come into where you expect the drone space to get a little more crowded? I mean, as we look at automated deliveries, as we look at basically just more traffic in that drone space.
Yeah, there's going to be more systems that come out that the FAA isn't the fastest, we'll call it that. But it's one of those where once we're able to do air traffic management with drones and find a way to really regulate, because people can make a drone at home that's not registered. And we see that in Ukraine. They make them on the fly every day. For regulatory, I could see it becoming more normal for folks, absolutely. Do I think the crowd, it's going to be crowded in the sky full of drones? No, that's way down the line. I think once they put a regulation on it saying, it's no more public fun drones, maybe we should use this for really public safety, first response, defense work. I think that really will start to clear up the skies a lot too. There's a lot of inexperienced folks out there. But do I see it taking over as far as delivery? That's a huge risk. But with our system, like I said, what happens when we're not flying a drone? What's that system doing? And that was really the back end story. Is we found out there were so many other use cases, and then on top of that, we call it the icing on the top, is it can deploy a drone for public safety. So that was a big deal. There's not always an emergency, but what can we do to help while we're sitting there?
So when you look at where you've come from building up Gale, what advice would you give to other founders that are either stuck in older systems or that might be afraid to actually update and modernize their systems to look forward? Is there any specific, other partnerships? Is that really the key, or is it?
It
Or where
helped
do you think it
us.
would go?
Partnerships helped us learn and scale faster because you can't be an expert at everything. Surround yourself by smarter, faster moving people, and you will as well. You're going to get 1,000 no's. You're going to get people telling you, the naysayers, this isn't going to ever work or go somewhere. As long as you can find out why they're saying that, you can learn from that. So I think a lot of folks need to be a little bit more open-minded of when someone says the negatives. And when you start to grow and really get out there and you're doing podcasts and you're in the media and the industry news, like Gale just happened, we've got those folks. But then they're like, hey, he did think about that part. So we listened, and that was a big deal. And I try to say this lightly, is there's one thing you can't teach people, and especially as startups and entrepreneurs. And if you don't have drive, it's not something you're going to wake up and have one day. You better get up and you got to push yourself. And there is a very fine line between insanity and passion, right? Like that's where, like, every day I'm going to get this negative result, but tomorrow I'm going to wake up and I'm going to do it again, knowing the same thing's going to happen. You got to push through that.
Absolutely. I'll tell you what, I am so excited about everything I've heard about you and Gale, the Gale Project. This has been such fun. So, shameless plug time. Where can investors and people find you on the web, and how could they contact you?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a very exciting time for Gale because in November, we're crossing fingers still that we're assembling our full-scale prototype. And it's going to have the limited operational aspects of it, but that's prototyping, right? We're going to make 20 more versions. This is an exciting moment because it was a milestone. It is the MVP of exactly what folks wanted to see and see it function and be able to go up and touch it. In reality, it's no more napkin idea. So that makes us an opportunity to open up the seed round. And that's what investors really wanted. Is a lot of folks want to say that we believe in you, Jay, and we've seen what you've done in the past. And the napkin was a great idea, but now it's a reality. Here it is. Here's the engineering behind it. Here's the functionality. And that's a lot of fun. So we're going to be raising a $3 million seed round, which will allow us to go directly into a manufacturing aspect and then execute a sales plan. And it's all written out very cleanly, very transparent, very excited to make those things happen. So the fun things are too, is you get to be a part of an amazing company that's going to make a difference.
Well, Jay, I tell you what, it has been an absolute pleasure having you today at the Effective Business Hub podcast. Once again, the Gale Project is a powerful example of exactly what happens when visionary engineering meets operational experience. And I think our listeners will walk away with a great sense of how innovation can be both ambitious and practical. I'm Tom Dimmer. This has been the Effective Business Hub. Thank you again to Jay Kriner, and we celebrate the builders, thinkers, and leaders that shape the next era of business. Until next time, stay innovative.